Okay. We can start meeting now. Let me share. Okay, hello everyone. This is Velero committee meeting on October 12th. Let's first check the status. So we are planning another minor release for 1.9, 1.9.3, and timelines still to be decided. So the issues to include it's still open. For V.10 and for the roadmap, we will reach the FC phase next Wednesday. Right now, there is no plan to change the time, and we will review the issues and the open issues and the items later. And if there is anything I need to change, we will update.
Thank you.
Yeah, for copy integration, everything seems on track, and the performance test is almost done, and we will share the result later. And for the port volume backup and restore refactor, we have almost done the primary parts, and after that there will be no major code changes. That's for the overall status. And personally, myself is working on the pod one backup and restore refactor, and I have finished the pod volume restore init helper container rename refactor, and submitted another PR. That's for my side. And next one is Quming.
Yeah, I'm almost finished the Velero performance test, and the test I've done over 13 runs, and the result shows that Velero backup with copy is faster than using Ristic, and the performance test report will be shown in the next committee meeting. Yeah, that's all for me.
Okay, thanks me. And 继续.
I was working on issue 5085, which is about modifying the subcommand of Velero CLI, and the PR about it has been merged. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
all.
Okay, thanks. And Daniel.
Yeah, I have refined the PRs for the must include in the backup item action plugin, and thanks Scott and Shubham for the quick review and they're merged. Also handled an issue regarding KMS ARN setting in AWS plugin. Turns out we don't need any code change. I just submit a small PR to clarify that in the documentation. And I have started reviewing the PR for the async item action plugin and all the V2 plugin and API designs. I just want to say sorry to Scott and Shubham for the delay. I believe Xun and Yonghui have done some review already, and I'll check with them, and hopefully we can have these PRs merged soon. And if there are any questions, I'll reach out for you guys to discuss. I'm sorry again. That's all my status.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. And Wenkai.
Yeah, I'm still reviewing the error plugin PR, use service principle to do the authentication and authorization. And the second item, I'm going to verify whether CSI plugin can back up error disks from multiple resource groups. Currently, the vSphere Velero error plugin can only back up the error disk from one resource groups, but there is some requirement that need the Velero have the capability to back up the ERDX from multiple resource group. So I'm going to try to verify whether a CSS plugin can meet the requirement. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thanks for that. And Danfeng.
Hi. I'm working on fix some in test script issues to stabilize the pipelines. Currently, we still have a few tests failed in CSI pipeline, and one of the issue is caused by external snapshotter, and the other tests are still under investigate. That's all from me.
Okay. Thanks, Danfeng. And Scott, please.
Yeah, so the first things listed here are just a reminder for the opening PRs that need review. There haven't been any changes to the async item action last week or so. I will mention regarding the backup item action plugin, I do need to make a small change to that tomorrow. I realize when I'm starting an implementation, kind of a draft implementation of the backup item action v2. Obviously, that's subject to change if we change the design before final update. But I just wanted to kind of get an initial implementation for one of the PRs up there. There's no PR yet for that, for the backup item action v2. But one thing I discovered as I started going through this, comparing the item action plugin design and the API design, is that I actually forgot a couple of fields. The new structure, the operation progress structure, my PR 5382 references that the operation progress. I'm missing two fields. Basically, we have a couple of timestamps, one for when it started and one for last update. So I need to add those two fields. If you look at the message operation progress line 69, but further down, line 69 through 74 at the bottom of the page here. Right there. So there's two more fields missing. A timestamp for when this was started and a timestamp for the last update. And so I will update this PR again probably tomorrow with that fix. Those two fields are already in the item action progress overall feature design. I just missed them when I created the specific API plugin design here. So I will update this with that change. And that may also filter through into the other two, the restore item action and the volume snapshotter. I think list that structure. It's not additional work for those. It's the same struct that's going to go in the shared file that will be used by all three of them, because all three of the plugins are going to use the same format for updating progress. So I just need to update that PR tomorrow. Those fields are already in the async action design, kind of the big design. They were just missing in the more specific detailed plugin API design. So hopefully tomorrow I will update that, and I will post a draft PR for the implementation of this first backup item action v2. Obviously, it's not ready to merge until the API design is approved. And also, since this isn't going into 110, we're not going to merge it until we create the release 110 branch, because we can't put it on main yet, because it's not ready to go for the release that we're preparing right now.
Okay.
So when I do create that PR, I'll post it as a draft, just so it's clear to everybody that it's not ready for final review. Feel free to review, if you have time, but it's not ready to merge yet, until we actually have that approved design and until we branch for 110.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Then we have only one discussion topic today. So it's about the time change, right?
Yeah, and I'll just mention, Orlin brought this up at the last meeting. We had some discussion around it. For the people on the US time zone meeting, I think the general consensus for those attending was that the proposal, the most recent proposal was generally favorable. And basically there's two aspects. There's the time change part, which is we want to move the North America centric meeting 2 hours earlier. That'll make it still inconvenient for Beijing, but close enough that if you need to join occasionally for, discussing issues, you can, because it won't be at, midnight anymore. It'll be, I guess it'll be 10 p.m. instead. So that will improve things a little bit there. There's no one time that's ideal for all of us, unfortunately, which is why we're having this discussion. And the other change was, instead of doing the first Wednesday, second Tuesday, thing where some months they're out of sync, and then there's the fifth, when there's a fifth Tuesday, Wednesday, we don't have a meeting, is to switch to just a bi-weekly. So we won't worry about first, second, third, or fourth, Wednesday or Tuesday anymore. It's just the 1 week it'll be the North America time zone meeting at 10 a.m. Which would be 10 p.m. Beijing time, and then the next week will be this current time slot, 8 a.m. for you and 8 p.m. here, and then we'll just alternate those, week to week. So we won't have missed meetings anymore, and we won't have weeks where the calendar wants to put 2 meetings in the same week, and that's the current proposal. And again, if there's any other feedback as to, is there anything to do to make this better? I mean, as one of the comments here was, again, 10 p.m. is still late for Beijing. This is clearly not an ideal time for your time zone there, but the idea is to make it slightly less inconvenient, so that if there was an important meeting that someone wanted to join, they could. The problem is that if we make it early enough to be more convenient, say, 10 or rather 8 p.m. instead of 10 p.m., that makes it too early for West Coast US time. That's the kind of the problem there, is that because this moves the meeting to 10 a.m. East Coast US time, which is where the majority of developers in North America are. But we still have people, I know from Dell, that want to join meetings sometimes as well. And that's 7 a.m. in US West Coast. Whereas if we moved it to 8 p.m. Beijing time, that would be 5 a.m. So, again, there's no one time that works for everybody. This was an attempt to make things, a little bit better for the people that the current times were bad for, but not significantly worse for other people. And I don't know whether Orlin is at the point where he's ready to make the change, I guess. But I just wanted to mention it here in case there was any additional feedback. And again, if there is additional feedback, I would say put it on the discussion here. I mean, you can mention it now as well, but the point is that not everybody is on the call now. For example, Orlin is not on this call because I think it's 3 a.m. in his time zone. So, he's clearly not going to be joining this meeting anyway. So anyway, that's all. I just wanted to bring it up here since it was mentioned last week. And I'm hoping that we can get these changes made relatively soon, so we can kind of start to get a little more participation. And one of the problems we had with the North America meeting is that, there have been weeks where there's just hardly anyone there because, it's several of us from Red Hat and maybe someone from Dell, and that's pretty much it. And this change might make it a little bit easier for others to participate in those meetings.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott, to throw out this again in this committee meeting. I think for Beijing folks, we have already doing some discussion on this topic. Actually, the proposal you just mentioned here is something that Beijing folks have already reached agreement on that. So
okay.
Yeah, so I think we should be okay for changing the time to that proposal. So that's our opinion, I think. So if anything else.
Which one is it? Which proposal? Sorry.
When you open this link, this one, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that last comment was yeah, and that's what we were kind of basing on when we brought it up last week, and I just wanted to make sure. It sounds like we're getting closer to consensus here to suggest that this set of times. And again, there's 2 changes. There's the time part, but there's also moving it to bi-weekly to avoid the kind of confusing scheduling, because the current calendar invites are the first Wednesday and then the second Tuesday and then the third Wednesday, and there are just several times a year where that results in kind of calendar chaos, and it doesn't work because of the different time zones. And the months that have 5 Tuesdays or whatever. So making it bi-weekly is going to simplify that as well. I'm
Right.
hopeful, at least. But yeah, the big question that I still don't have an answer to, and I guess I can ping Orlin about this tomorrow, is, okay, if we're all agreeing on this, when do we make the change? Do we start that next week? Do we start that first of next month? But at some point, I think I don't know if Orlin owns those calendar invites, but whoever's managing those invites, we just need to make that change, and then update the community website as well to make it clear.
Yeah, I think Ollie is managing. Ollie currently is managing this invitation. I think he he's on all this of this schedule. So if we are reaching agreement on this, we can ask Ollie to do some change based on the proposal.
Okay, so have we decided that, or we need to wait for other maintainers?
Well, I think I know last week when we had the call on the again the sort of North American schedule side, with the exception of Dave, all of the maintainers in those time zones were there, which is just basically Shubham and myself, and we both had agreed that works for us. So if everybody in Beijing also agrees that this works for them, I think we're at the point on the maintainer side where we now have everyone's input. And in terms of other community members that are regularly attending the meeting, I know some people from Dell are here as well as in the other meetings. And I think my understanding last week when that was mentioned was that they were pretty much okay with this as well. So I didn't hear any objections saying no, we don't want this, we want something else.
Yeah, I think that time works for folks in Beijing. We are not joining all the evening meetings, but that makes it possible.
Right. Oh, and to be clear, I don't think there's any expectation that you join every meeting. The reason for moving it to 10 versus midnight is to make it possible to join when you feel you need to join, so we can have those conversations. But at the same time, I don't think there's an expectation that everybody that's a maintainer in Beijing comes every single meeting at 10 p.m. That's not really reasonable. But this is hopefully to make it possible to join. Just like for those of us on the North America side, at the 8 p.m. meeting, it works for the most part most of the time, but I'm going to have a conflict at this time more often than at 10 a.m. just because it's out of my normal work schedule, and that's fine. So the thinking behind the biweekly is hopefully there's at least 2 meetings a month that everyone can be clear on always making, and then the other 2 they can make as they're available and as it's appropriate for what they're working on.
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah, this sounds fine. So just to clarify, so we have bi-weekly and it'll be alternating between the first one and the second one?
Right, and that's really a small because right now we kind of have bi-weekly, except that we skip the 5th Tuesday of the month if there are 5, because the way it's currently scheduled is that the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays are North America, and the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays, just because it's Wednesday morning Beijing time, even though it's Tuesday night for us, but because it's the meeting scheduled in the Beijing time zone. So again, there were 2 problems with that. One was that we ended up not having a meeting, any time of the month had a 5th Tuesday or Wednesday. And the other problem with that was that sometimes, especially, when the 1st of the month was a Wednesday, you ended up where the first Wednesday, and I think it was the 2nd Wednesday and the 1st Tuesday happened in the same week. And so the calendar invite ended up having us scheduled, twice in one day and then not the next week. And with the bi-weekly setup, we avoid all that. Instead of worrying about what's the 1st or 3rd or 2nd or whatever Tuesday of the month, we just pick a start date and say, okay, this week's meeting is 8 p.m., 8 a.m. Beijing time. And then every 2 weeks from today, we repeat that meeting. And then next week we'll do, the North America time at 10 a.m. Oh, if it starts next week, I'm just saying, as an example. And then every 2 weeks, that's the meeting. So we don't have to worry about having weeks where the calendar invites mess it up and try to give us 2 meetings or no meeting.
Okay, then since we can let Ollie know and then set down the new schedule.
Yeah, and we just need to make sure that we update both the community website as well as the Slack notification
Okay,
to correspond to the change.
okay, thanks. And is there anything we want to discuss from anyone? If not, I have one small question about the data mover. Sorry, I didn't put in the discussion topic. That is, right now we have the backup item action v2 to add some upload progress, and then for the overall data mover process, we will have we will need to to attach the CSS sample to some port and then launch the underlying module to move the data. So for that part, what is the plan, or which PR we will include?
So
I think
basically the actual data movement part, as you mentioned, that would be handled by a different controller. But the way that interacts with the plugins is that the plugin would, so for example, the backup item action plugin would create a data mover custom resource, and that would trigger that other controller to start doing data movement. And then it would use the ID of that resource as the operation ID to return back to Velero. So the interaction between that and the plugin API design changes is basically the backup item action and the restore item action plugins are going to be sending that ID back to Velero, the backup or restore controller, so that we have that gets added to that list of ongoing operations, because the plugin stops, the plugin creates that CR, and then the other controller is doing data movement, and then the plugin returns control back to Velero to back up the next item. So the interaction with the plugins is, and that's where we passed that operation ID because we created the CR, and then we have the progress function that Velero will call after it finishes going through all the backup items to check progress. So if you had 30 volumes that you're using data movement for, you'll have 30 of these operation IDs and plugins that we're storing, and then Velero then goes back and calls all these to say, hey, what's the progress in this? We get that operation progress struck back that says it has the field for completed, errored, whatever, and then we can use that to update if there's errors. We can move the backup to a partial failure. If everything's done, we move it to completed, and if we're still waiting, then we move that to that new state, and that I can't remember off the top of my head, I forget the exact name of the state, but basically where Velero is completed with the backup, but waiting for data movement or other plugins to finish, and it can go on to start the next backup.
Then
so the connection between data mover and the plugins is really just in that API change, where the plugin execute will create that data mover CR and then return an ID that the plugin, when we call back in progress, it can use that to then query to do a cluster get call to determine the progress on the data mover, because the data mover is going to go and take that CR and it's going to have a PVC ID and the object store location and all the information that it needs for that data movement to copy the file over, or to copy the contents rather of the file over. And this is going to be I guess it would be the CSI backup item action plugin that would be doing this. And then, so when you pass progress back into that plugin later, it can look up that data mover backup resource to see, okay, status says it's done, or the status says it's still in progress, and here's where we are. And then that progress returns back to Velero.
Yeah, and for the for the controller to process the data mover CR. So we still need some design. For example, whether we attach all the snapshots into one, one pod, or handled by in parallel, or just handle but one by one. And how do we handle that data movement? For how do we move the data? So for that part, we still need some PRs. So what is the plan for that PR? And
so Shubham has a data mover design document, I believe, that builds on top of this item action change. I guess Shubham, you can talk about where that design is, what's left to do on that, and what's needed before we can start implementing it.
Yeah, so I need to create a new PR for that. So as discussed, we need to merge the phase 1 PR that we have open right now, and I'll do a subsequent PRs regarding the implementation parts of the data mover story.
So you're saying we still need a design PR to determine, to agree on how we're going to implement this, like was mentioned, in terms of what's done in parallel, or how we handle this, what the new CRDs are that we need, all of that, and then once that design is approved, then we can start implementing that.
Yes.
And that's something, again, the async action plugin design is something we need first. And
so
that's
something.
So
APIs,
what's that? Yes. So the point is that the data mover and the async action plugin, those are, one depends on the other, but we don't have to have data mover for the async action to make sense. So depending on how long it takes us to get the data mover and everything together, it is possible that those two both make it into the same Velero release and they get released together. It's also possible that we might have one release that has the new plugin design and implementation, but the upstream Velero data mover itself may not be implemented yet. But the fact that we have a plugin design that's implemented means that someone that's using Velero can implement their own data mover using the plugin design if Velero doesn't have it yet. But at the same time, when Velero finally gets the data mover together, will be implemented, that will be built on top of these V2 plugin changes.
Yes, Scott, thanks for pointing that out. But as for the timeline, I think we still need to clarify with the PM from our side, because we used to think that will be in part of 1.11, but due to the reorg and distractions, maybe we need a longer release cycle for the 1.11 to make sure that we have everything for data mover together, or we leave that into different releases.
Another approach would be to have a shorter release cycle that completely cuts off data mover and just gets the item action stuff, and then we do a follow-on 1.12, soon afterwards that includes data mover. That's one thing I know, because one thing we're doing on the OADP side at Red Hat is that we're building for our current release, where we were building our own data mover that just uses the existing CSI plugin, so it's blocking, and so there's some performance concerns with that. And one thing from our timeline is that once we have the async action plugin in a Velero release, we can modify our existing outside of upstream Velero data mover to use that, and then eventually, once Velero's data mover is released into upstream, then we can use that instead. But getting the async stuff implemented and released as soon as possible, allows us to fix that performance issue we have with the blocking on CSI plugins, earlier, and then we can follow up with Velero kind of in the next release to get that data mover in place. So that's another way of doing it there. Thanks
a lot for this update. That makes sense, but I think we may discuss in the UF tab when Pradeep has a chance to join. And
yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to, you mentioned possible lengthening 1.11 process. I just wanted to mention it because kind of our thinking at Red Hat, talking to Shubham and others, was that because we originally wanted the async action in 1.10, it slipped for obvious reasons. We weren't able to fit it in, but we've been waiting on that for some other functionality. So I'm hoping to get 111, as quickly as possible so we can get this in place. So that's why my thinking is we want that first, and then we can kind of follow on with Data Mover shortly afterwards. Obviously, that's a longer discussion, but just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, I think makes some valid points. Thanks, Scott. And yeah, I'll certainly bring that out when I have a chance to talk to Pradeep.
Okay. Thanks, Scott and Shubham. Do we have any other thing to discuss? If not, I think we can stop here for today's meeting. Thanks, everyone, and have a good day and evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Goodbye.